feature for this call, Childhood Obesity Awareness Month. We're truly blessed to have, again, one of our own, Sister Nettye Johnson, a certified, not some Rudy Poop now, a certified national fitness coordinator. And she even looks the part. Sometimes folks that's got fitness, you have to wonder, joining us to share insights and strategies for promoting healthier lifestyles among our children and family. Sister Nettye, the floor is yours.
Dr. Miner, oh my goodness. Thank you so much for this time to share. Do we have JPEGs or yes? Oh, you all are awesome. Good evening, National Baptist. And we're going to just take a couple of moments to talk a little bit about the fact that September is National Childhood Obesity Awareness Month. It's a time set aside to discuss this growing health crisis. Truly, it is a crisis. To look at some of the causes, the consequences, and some practical things that we can do to help shift that tide in the direction that it's going. And so we're going to take just a few moments to do that tonight. On the next slide, we see what is the actual clinical definition. Clinicians use the BMI, or the body mass index scale, to determine a diagnosis of both overweight and obesity. It's a different scale than what is used for adults, and it also has some percentile adjustments, not only for the age of the child, as well as the sex of the child. And if any of you have been in the pediatrician with little ones anytime, you know that every time you go, they're charting the child's height and weight on a graph, and they're looking at where they fall in percentiles. So if they are at or above the 95th percentile, that does categorize in the area of obesity. And then you see that there are other ranges, for example, 85 to 94 would be in the overweight. On the next slide, we want to look a little bit about the prevalence of this. And it's very interesting that we see approximately 1 out of 4 children, particularly when we look in African American or Hispanic groups, 1 out of 4 have the condition of obesity. And on the next slide, one thing that I thought was really interesting is the increase in this prevalence. I was a child in the 70s, and I was an overweight child at that time. And when I was little, it was only about 5%. And I can remember, being teased and not seeing, many children that had weight issues as I did. But notice where we are now. This red bar that you see on the right, this is where we are using CDC data based on our data that we have here in 2024. More than 400% increase from just those many years ago, just 1, possibly 2 generations back. So we see that there is a tremendous and disturbing rise in not only the weight issues of adults, but also for our children. On the next slide, we look at why this is something that we want to be concerned about, because childhood obesity has some really significant possible risks and consequences. For example, children that have the condition of obesity have a higher risk or prevalence of developing conditions that typically in the past we only thought about with older adults. Things like diabetes. We now have younger children getting diabetes, asthma. I had asthma as a child, and sometimes there is a stronger connection with overweight connected with that. Things like sleep apnea. And we're even seeing some markers for cardiovascular disease, which in adults is the leading cause of death and disability in the United States. So we're seeing in younger children these increased markers of risks that can be connected to overweight. Aside from the prevalence of the physical things, we also have mental and things that do impact the mental health of some of our young people. Things like self-esteem issues, anxiety, depression. Y'all know kids can be mean, kids can be cruel, the bullying, all of those types of issues can sometimes impact our young people's mental health. And we also do find that when children have obesity when they're children, that sometimes that tracks and it translates into issues in adulthood. For example, adults that were obese as children, they tend to have higher lifetime medical expenses, oftentimes connected to 1 or more chronic diseases and conditions. They can also have impacts that are economic or social mobility related because of the stigmas and the things that are just still unfortunately, so entrenched in our economic educational systems. So it can have a number of effects that not only impact them physically, but also mentally, economically, socially, and so on. On the next slide, we want to talk a little bit about some of the things that we can do to address it. And I don't want to go into a lot of detail in the interest of time, but on the myplate.gov website, our national nutrition coordinator, director, Sister Ellen McKnight Hill, often points us to MyPlate. And there is a very specific section there that has education and information about helping our children to eat well. And I just really love to summarize it very simply. It's what Michael Pollan says about how to eat well. And he says, eat food, mostly plants, not too much. The eat food part is important because if we look at what we feed our children, and the key words there are we feed our children because our 5 and 6 and 3-year-olds are not feeding themselves. A lot of it is not really food, it's a food-like substance. It is so highly processed, so full of chemicals, so far from God's hand of creation and what he has given us in natural foods that are healthy for us, that if we could shift and give kids more natural foods and things that are not so processed, that could be a big help. We're grateful to see that there are some upcoming legislation as well as some individual decisions that large corporations are making to remove some of the dyes and the colorings and these things that are legal in other parts of the world and so prevalent here in the United States. But until that happens, we can make those choices. The other thing is to eat a lot of plants. We know that when on my plate, they said that more than half of that plate should be filled with plant-based foods, and then not too much, to exercise portion control because anything in excess can be too much for us. So there's a website there. It's at myplate.gov. And if you go to life stages and look under kids, there's a lot of information. A lot of these things we know, but it's good reminders for us to help to kind of turn the tide as it relates to childhood obesity. On the next slide, we also do have a lot of information that is available around activity. That is another very important thing. And the CDC does recommend that our children get at least 1 hour, that's 60 minutes, of physical activity per day. We know young kids, their bodies are made to move fast. You know, as we get older, we tend to slow down, but our kids have all of this energy. And y'all think about how our educational systems, and we even mirror this in church. How often do we tell kids, sit down, be still, stop moving, don't move, you know what I mean? And they're sedentary and they sit. We're seeing that some school systems don't mandate physical education. So if we can get our kids moving, where does that come from? Let's move and keep them moving. It's for adults, as all of us. That can be a big help. And again, if you go to CDC physical activity guidelines, there's a section for children there. But in closing out, y'all, I want to look at just a couple of other things that we can do. Can we go to the next slide? A big problem that we have. And this is not something that we can do to start, but it's actually a pullback, and that is to reduce screen time. Y'all, our kids spend incredible amounts of time in front of a screen, phones. I'm amazed at the babies, toddlers that have phones, that have tablets, that are constantly on these screens. We use them as a babysitter. And it's causing not only issues because there's so much input coming into developing minds that scientists do not yet know how this is impacting the neural pathways of our children. We have to wait a couple of more decades to see children that have been totally raised on this technology overload, what it's going to do for them when they're in their 40s and 50s. We're getting close to that part. But y'all, not only do we not know neurologically, as it relates to obesity, it causes them to be more sedentary, and they're also being bombarded with messaging that promotes things that are not healthy, unhealthy foods, you know, all kinds of things that are doing there. So the American Pediatric Association has recommended that for our children less than 2, y'all listen to this, they recommend 0 screens. 0 screens for that 15-month-old, that 1.5-year-old. They said they should not be on screens at all unless they are doing a FaceTime to another human. My Lord, we need to stop binding and connecting our children to inanimate technological objects, and we need to connect to people. And so they say less than 2, they recommend no screen time at all. Between 2 to 5, 1 hour per day. And above the age of 6, they say that it should be limited logically such that it does not do things like interfere with their sleep, 9 to 12 hours per day if they're under 12, 8 to 10 if they're a teenager. It doesn't interfere with them getting that 60 minutes of physical activity. It doesn't interfere with their schoolwork. Understanding that they do use it for schoolwork and education, a lot of this time that we are doing and allowing our children and promoting and even encouraging our children so they can sit down, be quiet, and not bother me, come on now, and hand them a tablet. We need to look at what we are doing, because again, the stewardship of these children, these souls that God has blessed us to nurture, is our responsibility until they reach a certain age. Let's take a look at the second thing that we can do, y'all. The second thing that we can do is we can live a healthy example, not only before them, but with them. Y'all, we tell our kids stuff, and we know that this goes in so many areas of life. Our kids are somewhat like those in Missouri. They like, show me. Like, you can tell me this, but what are we actually doing? So these things about eating healthfully, these things about moving, involve our children. I showed a couple of examples because, as I mentioned, I was with the condition of overweight and obesity. I also had exercise-induced asthma. Y'all, I literally thought I was allergic to exercise. I was sedentary. My husband had that as well. And so in my mindset, I could go and say, you know what? It's in my genes. Many people in my family had this condition. But can y'all put in the chat really quickly, biology is an aspect of it, but what percentage of our health is actually due to our biology and our genes? Can y'all just pop it into the chat real quick? Just throw some numbers. I'm just really curious. We're getting ready to close out. Can anybody tell me what percentage do you think it is? I'm seeing some 30%, 20%, okay, 30, 20. Did you all know that according to the social determinants of health, only 10% of our health is due to our genes and our biology? We can't change that part, but my Lord, it's only 10%. On the flip side, when we combine these aspects, culture, our social norms, economics, and our health behaviors, those elements together is 70%. So a lot of times when we say things like, oh, it just runs in the family, yes, it runs in the family's habits, not in the family's genes. There's a bigger impact on these things that we can change when we see it as a way of stewarding not only our bodies before our children, but helping to teach our children to steward theirs by doing things in front and with them. That means exercise with them. Take them with you when you're little. One of the most critical things that I think that we can do that helps so many things is just go for a walk if you are physically able with your children. It helps on a psychological aspect, in addition to helping them to get that 60 minutes. It binds families. There have been studies that show so many wonderful benefits, but look at what ways can we connect and show and garden or cook together or just do things with our children. So we're not just giving them some information that they don't see lived out in any practical and consistent way. And then the last thing on the last slide that I really do recommend that we do is that we also take a look at where we have influence so that we can focus community and faith-based support on healthy living behaviors. Remember, we got to change some of these cultural norms. We have to look at some of the things that the behaviors are, that 70% part. We can impact that. What's being served in our school lunches? Have we been down to the schools? Have we talked to the school boards? Have we looked online when they post what has been being fed to our children? Do we write a letter? Do we call someone? Can we influence those types of decisions on what our kids are being fed at school? Can we make some decisions and some changes to bring in healthier options in our neighborhoods? And here's one as I want to close. Let us as churches look at what we are feeding our children at VBS after worship, after Sunday school. Are we giving them little bottles of sugar? You know, those little small bottles of sugar sometimes have 12 to 15 teaspoons of sugar. Shook up is high fructose corn syrup, but that's the equivalent. We give that to them with some chips or some Cheetos or Takis, and then tell them to go sit down and be still somewhere and listen. Can we examine with a focus on stewardship how we can promote living well, because God desires that we be well and we be in good health. And to the best of our abilities, we know these earthly houses are going to soon decay, but the things that we can do, God is calling us to do. And as those who not only have children, but have influence over children, it's our responsibility to take these very doable steps to help God's children in our influence to be well. So if there are any questions, I'll take them at the end when everybody else is taking questions, but that's the end of the presentation. And I hope that information was helpful.
As always, Sister Nettye, you knocked it out the park. And she doesn't tell it, but her kids keep her rolling too, because they're very active,
Yeah, yeah.
as well. All right,
Yeah.
so thank you. Thanks, Nettye. And any question you put around, we'll come back around to it. Thank you so much for sharing tonight. All right, so whew, thank you. Valuable, empowerment.